What's up, guys? Today I'm going to give you an overview of macro recording software. There is a lot of different tools that you can use here. In this case, we're going to be running JitBit Macro Recorder. Okay? This is a tool that is normally paid, but you can use it for free for the first, it's like 40 or 60 days or something like that, okay? And technically, you could always just uninstall it, reinstall it, yada yada. It's not that expensive, and I actually do have a license for it. It's in my email, and I don't need to put it in right now, so I'm not, okay? So whenever you first open JitBit, you're gonna have this record a new macro button, or you can just click close. In this case, we're going to click close. But before I explain that, before I make any macros, I want to, I want to give you more of an overview of the way that the program works. Because macros in this case, you're not going to write code or anything. What you do is you perform an action, and then you use the macro recorder to duplicate that action that you performed. So macro recorders will either work with keyboard or with mouse or with both. Certain tools allow you to disable mouse clicks or disable keyboard buttons. Depending on the kind of thing you're trying to do, one may be more useful than the other. And I'm just going to show you super simple macros in this beginning part, but you should understand that you can use macros to automate almost any computing task, okay? Macros are very powerful tools, and I encourage you guys to learn to use them whenever possible. The easiest times to implement macros is when you are doing a task that is repeating over and over and over again, because then you can make a macro that does the loop like boom, 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 and you only have to do it once, right? So before we get into recording, let's explore the tool. So now you can see that there's all of the lines here, there's this command, and there's all of these buttons. Don't worry about these buttons. Some of these are like using scripts. You can run code. You can play other macros. You can open websites. You can send messages. You can connect to VPNs. You can shut the computer down. You can look for images. You can find items by the color of the image, right? You could associate, this shade of green only occurs in this space that I want to interact with, so you can find it that way. You can do pretty much anything here, okay? But what we're going to do is look at some of the more common settings that are going to be used. So in general, there's only a couple settings that you really need to understand. And the first one that I'm going to show you is in the recording settings. You will have to decide if you want to record mouse clicks only or mouse movement. I personally usually use mouse clicks because this way I could explore with the mouse like this, and I'm not wasting any efficiency with the macro. The macro is just going to remember exactly where I clicked, okay? So you're going to want to pick one of these two settings. You can also invert it and do some other things. But that's the first setting you want to pay attention to, is do you want to record mouse movement or just mouse clicks? For simplicity, I encourage you to just practice with just mouse clicks, okay? You can also decide whether you want to record the keyboard or the mouse. Either you could record none, you could record just the mouse, or you could record just the keyboard, okay? The next valuable setting for you to understand is the playback settings. So here, don't worry about playback speed. I encourage you to keep it at normal, okay? Because you're going to find that there's other ways to change the speed of your macro to make it more or less reliable. You'll often find that a macro can perform at a certain speed, but when you try and make it faster, it starts failing because the computer is not loading things fast enough. All right? So the section I want to show you here is the continuous replay section. If you put 0 here, your macro will go on an infinite loop. But say that you're doing a task 50 times. For example, when I used to do bulk drop shipping, I would have like 50 tabs or 200 tabs open, and I would need to perform the same action on every single tab, right? So in order to do this, I would have the macro run 50 times. That way, I could use a keyboard shortcut to start the macro, and then it would run till the end, and it would stop. This way, I'm not clicking on things that don't exist, right? Because there's not more than 50 tabs in that application of the tool, right? So this is another setting that you should understand, this continuous replay section. This will allow you to either do an infinite loop, which will make the macro do the same thing over and over again until you stop it, or you could have it be on like it runs it 10 times or 2 times, etc., etc. I usually use 0 until I know exactly how many times, or maybe 1, depending on the use case, right? The other thing to know in this section is the keyboard shortcuts. So you can change these if you want to, but this is how you play or resume recording of the macro. So you can start recording it by clicking Control R, and then stop by clicking Control R again. Then if you click Control P, it will perform the macro that you recorded. Okay? So now that I've introduced you to these basic settings, again, there's tons of way more advanced settings over here, we're going to record a very simple basic macro. Okay? And so I'm just going to use my desktop. I'm going to click Control R. Now JitBit is recording. So it's actually recording all of the time I'm taking to start doing something, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to double click on folder, and then I'm going to exit, and then I'm going to end the recording. Okay? And so now if I play the same recording, it should... One second, I may have messed it up here. Let's see. Yeah, there's too much delay. Yeah, look at all this. There's so much. Okay, so I actually need to change the settings real quick, because I actually only want to record mouse clicks. I didn't realize that I had done that. So we're going to restart. Going to click Control R to record. It's going to delete my existing macro. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click here in the desktop, and then I'm going to double click on folder, and then I'm going to exit. Okay? And now clicking Control R to stop. And we are going to see here that we have a series of commands that the macro will perform. So now if I click play, you can see I clicked there, double clicked, and then, well, it didn't finish, it didn't exit it. So if we open this up now, we can click this button. We can see that there's all of these delays, all right? And so a delay, I just deleted everything. All right, let's do this one more time. Click record. Now we're going to click here, double click on folder, wait a second, click here, exit, click over here again, and click stop. Okay? So now, if we click play, it'll open the folder, and then it'll close it. And then it ended. Okay? But you can see that right now, the macro is taking the exact same amount of time that I took to perform the action. And this is done by these delays here. Essentially, a macro is comprised of an action and then a delay, and then an action and then a delay, and then an action and a delay. So you can take a long time to record something to be more accurate, and then what you can do is to do Control A to select everything, right click, and then click Bulk Edit Delays in the selection. We're going to change this to 200 milliseconds. Okay? Now you can see that every delay is 200 milliseconds, or 1/5 of a second. So now if we play the macro, it's much faster. See? And it opened the folder and closed it. And if we want to change that setting I was talking about earlier so that it is set up in a loop, we could change this to 0. Okay? And whenever you're using a loop, you want to make sure that your macro ends in a delay like that. It just makes things be a little bit smoother. Okay? So now we're going to do it. Opens the folder, closes the folder. Opens the folder, closes the folder. Opens the folder, closes the folder. See? And so you might be saying, oh, well, and I made a mistake here. So there is another setting that we need to work with that I will show you. Because if you just noticed, I started trying to move the mouse, but the macro was still playing. And this caused that I'm like fighting the macro, right? What normally I would do is we're going to stop that, open this again, is go into the settings, and then we want to make sure that we stop the, here we go. Pause playback when user moves a mouse. That's a very useful setting. This way, you're not fighting your macro. It does mean that if your mouse gets jostled, it's going to pause the macro. So maybe that's not what you want, but it's an important setting to know, because now, if I run this macro, right? It's just doing this loop. It's opening the folder, closing the folder, opening the folder, closing the folder. I can touch the mouse once and it stops. Whereas before, I was trying to move the mouse, but the mouse is also moving in other places. I'm fighting the macro. So depending on your use case, you might want to do one thing versus the other. Okay? So now that you understand that, the next question that might come into mind is, oh, well, why are you doing 200 milliseconds? You should make it as fast as possible. And you're going to find that if you make your macro too fast, it will start performing actions before the computer has responded to the action. So let's show you what that looks like by bulk editing these delays and then changing this to 5 milliseconds. Okay? So now, if we try and do it, so it's kind of working, but the reality is, you see how now it's not working, it's broken. And look at this, it's played 100 times. Now it's played 150 times. It's not working. See? You don't want to run them as fast as possible. You're going to find that there is a point of accuracy that's too slow, and a point of speed that's not accurate enough. So you will need to find a balance. The faster your computer's CPU is, the central processing unit, then the faster you're going to be able to run macros without having that problem that I just showed you. However, if you have a slower computer, you're going to need to make the delays in your macros take longer. All right? And so that pretty much sums everything up. I just wanted to show you guys a brief overview of how to use Macro Recorder. We went over some of the basic settings that are important to use. Again, you want to make sure that you're either picking recording the keyboard or the mouse. I encourage you to click mouse clicks only. Playback settings if you want to loop it. And here, so you could change the playback speed here, but we can change the playback speed ourselves by using that bulk edit delay to change the delays in between each action. Okay? This is where you get your keyboard shortcuts. And sometimes certain actions you will need to give it more time for the computer to load. So you can put an individual delay like this. So everything's going to run at 5 milliseconds, except this one command is going to take 200 milliseconds. So that gives the computer enough time to catch up before the mouse click clicks on a box that doesn't exist yet. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Ciao!